Last but not least presenter for our symposium this year is Hunter Bunting. His topic is Hollywood with love. I will say no more.
I want you all to remember this presentation. For anyone who becomes a teacher or hears a teacher say, research what you love. Long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I was watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And the opening credits feature shots of Manhattan pizzerias, pedestrians in the best of 1992 fashion, and numerous product placements for Domino's and Pepsi, manifesting that perfect stereotypical image of the 1990s. This began the wheels turning on my thesis and how movies could be used as a historical reference. Disregarding historical fiction movies like Spartacus or Braveheart, looking directly and simply at entertainment movies such as From Russia with Love, to see what those movies that were made simply to entertain could end up teaching. Critical analysis of the films from the Cold War era shows that motion pictures can be used as an effective primary source when researching a historic era. The Birth of a Nation is a 1915 movie about the Civil War and the Reconstruction afterwards. It's regarded as a very highly innovative movie for editing and special effects, the avatar of its time. However, it is also criticized heavily for its positive portrayal as the KKK as heroes. At a private screening at the White House, President Woodrow Wilson remarked that it was like writing history with lightning, and my only regret is that it is also terribly true. Movies cause an immediate visceral reaction. They condense the entire process of reading a novel or textbook into an instantaneous emotional explosion. It does not draw out the message, only showing you exactly what you need to understand the story. Are movies all wild adventures of alien pirates, cowboy astronauts, gunfights, and car chases? What truth can that teach us? What is there in that strip of film that tells us about the history that is passed down? The overwhelming amount of movies in our society has undoubtedly changed and influenced the past. What has the movie done to our present with regards to our knowledge of the past? Many of the issues refocus our attention on the recurring problems in our society that each generation must solve for itself. The 1920s grappled with the reconstruction of a collapsed Victorian society model, making the people reevaluate their moral ambiguity, just as The Graduate or American Beauty. That's the wrong sentence. The Graduate or American Beauty both redefined that definitions of moral ambiguity in our own times. Reagan-era corporate values are explored in 1987's Wall Street, greed is good. Revisited in a world economy in crisis in 2010, greed is not only good anymore, it's legal. The critical viewing of their motion pictures will give audiences the ability to comprehend and understand their culture and history. Movies reflecting the changes of interests, fears, concerns, and hopes of the audience. This reflection is what makes film such a valuable historical resource. The Library of Congress has assembled these resources in an ever-growing list of films that they have deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. This includes the first films to combine motion and sound, footage from World War II, Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, and the Zapruder film from JFK's assassination, as well as other historic landmarks like the Muppet movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Dr. Strangelove, Star Wars, the first one, and Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. The hieroglyphs of Egypt show us the history of the pharaohs, how buildings were constructed, and the story on the walls of tombs were painted to tell the stories of those inside the tomb. This is a tomb painted it shows the sowing, reaping, harvesting, gathering, and then they would find it look like this. They would lay the kernels out in a big like sheep, have the cows stomp on them, sort them all out. They would organize it and survey the land for taxes. And then up here is the guys that tried to dodge their taxes, and the collection agents are beating them. In a millennium, when the world has encountered numerous wars, alliances, and technologies, will the people of the future look at the hunt for Red October like we look at this tomb painting? Films are windows into the cultural principles and approaches. If one looks at movies within the supporting context of the history that the film was created, you can get an effective resource for historic perspective. Days of Glory, North Star, and Mission to Moscow supported the view that Russians were good, wholesome people. who just happened to be under a communist government. Days of Glory and North Star are both about the guerrilla resistance to Nazi Germany after the invasion of Russia in World War II. Set in Ukraine, it was about the wronged people standing up against evil and fighting for what they believed in and their freedom. Mission to Moscow was considered a propaganda film endorsed by FDR to help the American people accept their Russian allies during World War II. The film was about the Stalin-headed government and political mechanisms in Moscow leading up to the invasion of Russia. The Soviet Union began developing its own nuclear arsenal in 1949. The United States started the arms race, where we wanted to maintain our overabundance of weapons to deter people from attacking us first out of fear of the massive retaliation. Dr. Strangelove shows the illogical logic of that government policy and the flaws of deterrence theory. Close examination of the movie shows the depth of the public's concern about the high-strung nature that kept the world out of nuclear war. Dr. Strangelove rejected the rationale that the arms race and massive retaliation were the best course of action for our country, and encouraged the breakdown of the accepted social values that characterized the 1960s and founded less aggressive courses for diplomatic and political action that would reduce international tensions. In 1950, Senator Joseph McCarthy from Wisconsin produced a list of suspected communists within the government. This ignited the paranoia already in the country about the communist threat, and for the rest of the Red Scare, it would be McCarthy's image and his reckless and unsupported claims that would be synonymous with this hunt for communists within the country. McCarthy relentlessly hunted for anyone who was remotely connected in any way, shape, or form to anything communist in nature. His original goals were to find the communists in government. However, once Eisenhower was elected president, he began seeing the problems with McCarthy's reckless, indiscriminate blind firing in the government, especially if he was the man in charge of that government. So therefore, McCarthy had his anti-communist momentum redirected to the next most powerful organ in the country, Hollywood. McCarthy, with the help of the Screen Actors Guild, blacklisted many of the industry's finest. Blacklisting was an exclusion or denial of recognition from within the industry. Being blacklisted by McCarthy at this time pretty much outcasted you from the rest of American society. Orson Welles from Citizen Kane, Arthur Miller, who wrote The Crucible, and Burgess Meredith, who played Mick and Rocky, were some of the more recognizable names that were blacklisted. HUAC, or the House Un-American Committee, tried the suspects that were considered communists within the government. It was a House of Representatives committee. McCarthy was connected to the Senate. So that means that the United States government was united towards a common goal in getting rid of communists. Popular figures in the industry immediately saw this opportunity being presented to them and gave HUAC their support, including Walt Disney and then president of the Screen Actors Guild, Ronald Reagan. They provided information on not only the communists but the political left in the industry and boosted their profits and prestige. Only the very, very powerful and those who didn't care about their public image had the audacity to stand up against McCarthy. Hugh Hefner in Playboy and Edward R. Murrow both openly criticized McCarthy. They didn't care about the stigma that they were receiving from him. And it was impossible to openly stand up against McCarthy and not get that communist stigma. Some more illusionary methods were used to show the injustice that was happening. High Noon showed a veteran marshal save a town from bandits. Then the town celebrates and hails him as a hero. Until the bandits escape and return for their vengeance on the town and the marshal. The town doesn't help the marshal at all. They cut him loose and abandon him to his fate. Arthur Miller's Crucible is a direct reflection of the HUAC trials with the Salem witch trials. The protagonist, John Proctor, is killed for being a witch, which, of course, he is innocent. But he will not save his life by soiling his name by admitting something he is not. The Day the Earth Stood Still is about an alien messenger who comes to Earth to prevent a nuclear war that's going to destroy not only our planet, but the rest of the known universe. The protagonist, Klaatu, he spends the movie trying to tell the world leaders about this warning, but their arguing and fighting amongst themselves prevents them from ever meeting as a whole. The message given is about the world's recent development in space travel and the atomic devastation Earth's leaders would soon be unleashing. The movie also serves as an allegory about condemning people because of their difference and opposing view, as well as drawing attention to the unwillingness of the world's leaders to compromise for the sake of all. You wanted him, you got him, James Bond. The first James Bond was released in 1962, Dr. No, and since then, the series has enjoyed enormous popularity and circulation, not only in just America, but the rest of North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, all showing high James Bond box office numbers. It is also estimated that at least a quarter of the world's population has seen at least one James Bond film. For those of you that don't know the world population, that translates to 1,693,808,925, roughly. James Bond's films mimic the policies of Cold War era nations and at the same time exaggerating them to promote profits in the box office. Cycling through 6 different James Bonds in the actor's series, the saga began in 1962 with Sean Connery fighting red agents of an independent multinational criminal ring. Bond fights through the entirety of the Cold War, where in 1995, Pierce Brosnan picks up the pieces of a world where the Soviet Union has collapsed and is selling its weapons to terrorism. And now we watch Daniel Craig matching wits with ex-KGB bankrollers and criminals who don't ransom in American dollars because the euro is more economically sound. Rarely does something in popular culture stay this popular for so long without phasing away into reruns or a loss of its fan base. Bond has endured this fire, and watching how this series has evolved shows how the world has evolved as well. The James Bond films show that there was no safe place in the midst of the Cold War, and the only safety we had was in the deeds of a government secret agent, and not the extensive collection of weapons and armies in the NATO alliance. The weapon of choice in this new age is cinema. As religion served as the masses' opiate to fuel Russia, and vodka eats the capital stage of Russian development, so too did cinema liberate the masses. An educational overlord in a nation with a population of mostly illiterates. Lenin would direct this form of learning with his directive on cinema affairs. Establishing the Leninist proportion, 75% of the newsreels and movies were to be reasonable entertainment films that would entice and attract the audience's imagination and fill theaters. While the remaining 25% of the newsreels and films were to be documentaries or propaganda. The documentaries appeared under the title From the Life of the Peoples of the World, and they featured the British colonial rule in India and the impotent work of the League of Nations. The bunny is wearing a League of Nations sash, if that's kind of fuzzy. Lenin created Goshkino, a central party-controlled cinema group that monopolized the film industry. They held control of the distribution of films, the rental of filming equipment, leasing of studios and theaters, and anything else involved, from the first keystroke of script writing to the last usher sweeping up after the film was over. Anyone involved in that process, start to finish, had to report through Goshkino. However, several independent companies that were supposed to work under Goshkino went out and distributed their own newsreels, produced their own films, and imported foreign films. Goshkino had no control over this because it had a very, very big network with very, very big holes. So the small film companies would slip from under its control. It was unable to collect its royalties and dues because of this, and the cost of keeping a defunct organ at the state was just not worth it to the party. The Soviet filmmaker existed only to take the revolutionary life, the life of the workers and peasants, the people holding the hammers and sickles of industry and farming, and put their lives on the big screen. They were to show how the hard-working farmer, the factory worker, and the natural habitat. No fancy exaggerations. Let the world see the mightiest people in the world as they truly are. And to the people, the message was, if they only united together and struggled together, worked together, would they eventually be rewarded together. In the beginning, the Soviet film industry focused on the bright, beautiful present and future that was coming. Films like The Extraordinary Adventures of Mr. West in the Land of the Bolsheviks shows a new nation of intellectual, sophisticated, and rational thinking people who are visited by a naive, slapstickish clown. He hires a cowboy bodyguard to protect him from these anti-party, heathen-looking people. It was a propaganda film to turn the minds of the people toward the idea of Soviet superiority. What defines propaganda is propaganda and not simply advertising. It is the control over the purpose and direction of the media that determines what and what is not propaganda. Weather can affect a person's choices, yet it is not controlled by an agent. Someone may decide to go out and vote because it's not raining. Someone may go and decide to purchase a new car if it's bright and sunny. It's even possible that someone becomes so depressed from the sun not shining that they kill themselves. But until the weather can be controlled by an agent, in order to force a person to vote for a specific candidate, buy an Aston Martin over a Mercedes, or force a person's hand in suicide, you cannot attach the choice that person made to the weather. The Cold War was not determined to be a hot war because the United States and the Soviet Union did not openly declare war on each other. The war they fought was on billboards, TV screens, and movie theaters. It was about ideologies and psychological manipulation. And the Hollywood movies of this time showed that paranoia, fear, and aggression that was so prevalent in our country at the time. Dr. Strangelove showed the people about the dangers and the policies the government was following. James Bond gave people hope that the government was protecting them. also how to be a swaggering capitalist. McCarthy hunted down the communists hiding in the film industry who were going to destroy us from within, while the Soviets used film as a tool to condition the citizens to see the glory that would come if they just endured the hardships of their lives. To deny movies as a historic reference would be to deny the art of the Renaissance, the oral traditions of Native American tribes, or the histories of nations with no written language. Motion pictures can be used as an effective primary resource when researching a historical era. This is exemplified with critical analysis of the films from the Cold War era. The motion picture industry's connection to the audience allows for this preservation of culture. Films will address topics and issues in their movies that the audience identifies with in their own current political, economic, or social atmospheres. Critically analyzing a film will reveal the framework of the time in which the film was made. Do not look solely to film as your reference, though, because like all historical research, looking at one resource will give you absolutely useless results. Study film with other materials, both primary and secondary sources, and research will be strengthened and reinforced. Study of history is always associated with some theory of he who controls the past controls the future, or the past repeats itself. So then, is it possible to predict the future by watching movies? I don't think so. When asked about the future, a very wise teacher once said, "Difficult to see, always in motion is the future." However, Russian writer Victor Shklovsky made a prediction that in 1922, I think, has in fact proven true. You shall see the American film containing even more stunts, with acrobatic turns, and very little attention paid to the plot, but with the use of animals, train crashes, and art as artistic raw material. This movie made a worldwide gross of $79,282,312, and that's an exact. Thank you for your time. Sorry, man. It's last stop on the history train.
Going back to what you said about Catherine speaking now about McCarthy,
Yeah.
Do you think that because of the nature of his business that he did not suffer the same effects that somebody else who might have spoken out against?
Yes, there. A lot of people really don't take that magazine as like a viable, like, authentic, wholesome resource to do something. He was already outcast, so there was really no need to push him further out of the loop of Americana. So I think that was more why he got away with it. Again.
So then, what do you think that says about our society? That we like him?
That is an excellent question, and if you would like to talk to me afterwards,
Does your sword have a light?
No, it doesn't. It's one of the cheaper ones, because the ones with lights have, like, they have to keep this thing because it has a battery in the back. That would have been kind of cool, but those are like $30.
Next time.
Next time. Graduate thesis. Yes, sir.
What's your favorite James Bond film?
Goldfinger. The third one. That is it.
Could you comment on maybe the more recent propaganda in American film, or when do you think like the last propaganda films were really made?
Until the end of all organized government, there will never be an end to propaganda.
So what kind of propaganda do you see in modern film? And specifically in Hollywood films?
I'd say anti-government propaganda could be seen in Fahrenheit 9/11. The things Michael Moore kind of does. He goes on the extreme to push a point through. So, I mean, you could attribute even, oh God, please don't get mad at me for this, Obama's change, those kind of pictures, they had a very, very visionary, like you would see them and you could remember them. there was a man who ran for USA Senate that used some of the similar. Because the image would stick with people and it was very identifying. It identifies and defines what people look at and remember. Push the point.
And the green man too, yeah.
Green man. Yeah. St. Patrick's Day. Is it Green Man?
How do you feel about other forms of entertainment? Things like video games as a matter of historical reference.
I think video games haven't been around long enough to put an image across. The thing about video games is like in the very beginning, they had it was very crude graphics, so you couldn't get like an accurate portrayal. There's a plumber running around in pipes stomping on turtles. Nowadays, you're getting things like war video games that show, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, and the more the technology develops that you can show it more realistically, I think it will become 10 years from now, someone else could be doing a video game thesis very much like this. Yeah. John Bruce.
Aside from the James Bond and Doctor Strange one, you found a lot of allegory and meanings with other movies, correct?
Yeah. I had to cut it down for the presentation, but there were a couple others I mentioned in my paper that do the same thing. But it's more common to see something like James Bond that has lasted so long, being able to reflect the change more of the day that Earth stood still or Doctor Strangelove. It was like a single moment that was encapsulated. That with a series, you can get the point A, point B, point C, point D, all the way until you have to start doing like you'll run out of alphabet before the points end.
What do you think of semi-historical movies, such as the recent Princess Kailani film, Pearl Harbor, God forbid I ever speak those words, and other films such as those? Do you think they have a fair representation, or should they just be from the trash bin?
No, they definitely show, they can reflect things. Saving Private Ryan, Platoon, Vietnam veterans that watched that, they were so remembered of their experiences in the wars that they had to leave the theater. They couldn't watch it because it was so real to them. So definitely the historical fiction of movies. You can, but the problem with that is to take a historic moment and put it in a society or in a medium where people are going to want to go and see it, you have to make exceptions and you have to cut things out and change them so it's more pretty, lack of a better word, so people will want to go and see it and not be like, oh man, I can just go to my history class and so that's the problem.